Nation. Welcome to yet another episode of What's Happening Now with Laura. Just caught me on a little bloopers break there, being goofy in studio, but it's all good. I am so excited to be beaming into your homes, into your living rooms, your bedrooms, and your favorite watering holes this evening. You have no idea what it's taking me to contain myself. But before we go into my special, very, very extremely special guest this evening, my preamble is going to be extremely short tonight. There's one thing, though, that's really, really bugging me. It's really getting me on my last nerve. This thing of domestic abuse. This thing about men not being able to control themselves. This thing about men just because they want a woman and can't have her the way they want her, thinking that they could just take the law into their own hands and just do away with her, is really getting to be very tired. Very, very tired. So last week, I think it was, or the week before, we observed, and I'm looking for a better word to use, but let's just say observed, yet another snuffing out of a young woman, 32-year-old woman, was killed and left, nobody knew what happened. Today, doing my follow-up and preparing to come in to do this show, I found out that the alleged perpetrator of her crime, of her murder, was none other than her boyfriend, who was recently released from prison, who wanted to work things out with her, but she was having none of it. And who could blame her? You're a jailbird. You're an ex-convict. You've gone to prison for whatever reason. Any self-respecting woman wouldn't want to be associated with an ex-convict, in particular, one whom she thinks is not going to add any value to her life. Is not going to bring anything to the table, whatever the reason was for you going to prison. And here you are trying to make things work with her, and she's having none of it. And you think the best thing to do is to snuff her life? And as if that wasn't enough, after you've killed her, this is not enough that you've killed her because she was having none of you. You thought nothing of it. But to go jump up in Carnival? Like, that was passing the day, passing wind. No big deal. I just killed her. I'll just kill somebody and go jump up Carnival. How heinous can you be? How callous could you be? How hardened must you be? How cold-hearted and calculated must you be? To go to a woman's house that you claim to be affectionate towards, try to make things work out with her. When that didn't work, decide to kill her. Par for the course. It's just another blip in my life, and go jump up Carnival. That reminds me of another incident years ago where a young man had decided that the big fur that he had, and you all know, just try to translate that into Creole and you'll understand what a big fur is. So that big fur that he had because his woman had left him was too much for him. He left Castries, followed her all the way to Vieux Fort, having had harassed her weeks and days beforehand, followed her all the way to Castries, to Vieux Fort, from Castries, murdered her, or rather murdered her bodyguard, and left her for dead. Then traveled all the way back to Castries and joined the jazz celebrations, as if nothing had happened. And that's where he was captured, working jazz. Just like this last one, this idiot, this miscreant, this moron, this less than a speck of dust under somebody's foot, having killed a woman that he claimed that he wanted to be with so much, saw nothing to it but to join the Carnival celebrations in Gros Islet. Now, so some might say, thank God that other idiot decided to discharge his weapon, harming 2 men. Thank God that he had done that. Otherwise, the police may not have found him. As callous as that may seem, this is exactly what happened. as a result of an idiot discharging a weapon in a group of revelers. Police presence was heightened, and this moron was captured. They say all's well that ends well. I hope the book is thrown at him and he deserves everything coming to him. Because it's really, really barbaric. And it's really, I mean, what do we tell our girl children? What do we say to them? You know, how do you begin to prepare them for a world where a man could come up to them and be all lovey-dovey and profess their love to them and then turn around and harm them? What kind of world are we living in when that kind of horror continues to happen? Now, some might say, oh, why you look at it as gender-based violence? But it is. She would never have died if it weren't for the fact that she was a woman involved at one point with this idiot. You know, some of us are so sensitive, especially the men, so sensitive when we start talking about gender-based violence. It's almost as if, well, you know, there's something to feel uneasy about. But if you know you're one of these men who would never think of harming a woman, but you're keeping the company of men who do that, then you have every right to be uneasy. Because you know what the old adage says, right? Birds of a feather. And we have to stamp that kind of behavior out, people. Stop keeping company with these people, these men who feel that the only way to make themselves feel good, you know, the only way that they can beat their chest and puff up their chest and make themselves feel less, you know, of an animal is to hurt somebody else. That's not love. And women, be very careful. Be very selective. I don't care what they call you. I don't care how they look at you and say, oh, wow, she thinks she's all that. She's from the ghetto and she don't want to talk to nobody. That's not your concern. That's their circus. Let them twirl around. You be very selective. You be very selective about the men that you let enter your lives. Because you have a great responsibility on your shoulders. You're the cradle of society. You birth children. And oftentimes, the responsibility for raising those children lays squarely on your shoulders solely. And you have to be an example for your children, particularly your girl children. You've got to be. So please be very selective. Be very selective. Be very careful of the men that you let enter your life. Beware of those bursts of anger, you know, these temper tantrums, this obsessive behavior that some of us think is so cute because it signifies that he loves us so much that he can't do without us. No, it's not cute. He's just one step away from abusing you. All the experts will tell you that. Be very careful of about the obsessive behavior, the compulsion to always want to know where you are, who you're talking to, who your friends are, where you're going, when you're going, how you're going. Be very careful because it just might turn around and bite you on the ass. Now, speaking about being very careful, I read an article today. It just occurred to me that present company excluded, that a lot of the issues that I uncovered over the week dealt with a lot of morons, a lot of men who are so stupid. Forgive me for being so blunt. But I read this article about this Barbados ex-government minister who was arrested and charged with money laundering in the U.S. And so I read the article, I'm like, okay, yet another government official, what's new? And then I read that he was arrested for accepting bribes and laundering those bribes through a dental company in the US for consultancy work. And then it said the amount of money involved, $36,000. $36,000? You're going to lose your reputation, your good name for $36,000? So I was speaking to a friend of mine about it, and he asked me whether it was Bajan dollars or US dollars. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. It could be euros, it could be sterling pounds. It doesn't matter. $36,000 is nothing to sully your name for. I mean, how desperate must you be? Or is it just the thrill of taking something that you know you're not supposed to be taking anyway? $36,000 and going through all of that elaborate nothingness, I say, because you were still caught. And then you're going to have to spend more than $36,000 anyway to defend yourself. Shame. For shame, for shame, for shame. Anyway, this is where I'm going to end my preamble. There's so much more that I wanted to say. Oh, yes. Before, I think there are a few people who are going to kill me if I don't deal with this Venezuela issue. So a lot of you have been stopping me on the roads and asking me, what do you think about the Venezuela issue of asking for visas that Venezuelan citizens are supposed to now be imposed visas on, and that the Chinese and yada, yada, yada. You know the drill. And I say to the people, well, what's the big deal? We have visas imposed upon us by other countries. And they're like, well, Venezuela is our friend and Venezuela has given aid. I say, it tells me that you don't always follow, because I've always been uncomfortable with all of the aid that we've been receiving from Venezuela. I have a problem with a country not being able to take care of its people, for people not to be able to get milk on the shelves, to feed their children, to feed the babies. They're not able to get simple things that we take for granted, like toilet paper. And yet they're giving all of this aid to all of these countries where the citizens are not as hard pressed. So I've always had an issue with that. But be that as it may, we've accepted a lot of aid, and yay for us. But governments being friends or friendly to other governments, I don't think that's the issue. The Venezuelan government has been a friend to the St. Lucian government and the people of St. Lucia, yes. But when your people, your citizens, are making it difficult for you to maintain a good name, these are the consequences of what happens. So yes, Venezuela has been a friend, an ally to St. Lucia, and yes, they've been giving us aid, but does that mean that we have to await the inevitable? Well, let me not say inevitable. Let me look at it the other way. Remember a few years ago, Canada imposed visa restrictions on St. Lucians? Canada is our friend, and yet they imposed visa restrictions on St. Lucians. You think they didn't think, oh, well, it's an ally and we've been good to them. No, but they slapped us with visa restrictions. You know why? Not because our government did anything to the Canadian government, but because our citizens did not know how to behave themselves in a foreign land. A country that had been very good to us. They did not know how to behave themselves. So what was the result? What was the consequence? We were slapped with visa restrictions. Likewise, America has been our ally. We've been friends with America. And remember the Leahy Law? And we have had restrictions, visa restrictions on us ever since I've been a person on this earth. Martinique, not too far away. I grew up knowing that if you had to go to Martinique, you needed a visa. It's a recent phenomenon that we don't need a visa if we're going to Martinique, I think, for less than 21 days. I think that's what it is. I stand corrected if I'm wrong. But it's recent. It's only recent. It's a recent thing. I mean, a few years. It's not decades that those visa restrictions were lifted. So where do we get off thinking, oh, because Venezuela has been good to us, we ought not to restrict their citizens from possibly coming into our country and creating mayhem? I ask you to just look at Trinidad and look at Guyana and the issues that they've been having. And if our government thinks that this is the best thing for the time being that needs to be done to protect their citizens, the citizens, because their primary focus is to ensure that we are safe and that our borders are safe. And if they think that's the best thing for them, hey, I ain't got no problems. I ain't got no quarrels with that. Last I checked, I don't even think the government of Venezuela had a problem with that. And that's my take on the visa thing. Visas are restrictions that are placed on a number of countries for a number of reasons. We're not going to be the first, and we're not going to be the last. We're due for a break. When we come back, my very special guests. Welcome back, and thank you for staying tuned to What's Happening Now with Laura. Hard as it might be, St. Lucia, Antigua, Jamaica, Barbados, to name a few, these islands have been likened to West Sahara and parts of the Middle East as it relates to water scarcity. 97% of Earth's water is salinated, meaning they come from oceans and saltwater bodies. Only 3% of the world's water supply is fresh. That is amazing, isn't it? Considering that 70% of Earth's surface is covered by water. This evening, I have a very special guest with me. He's an inventor, he's a designer of machines, he's a builder, he's a systems engineer, he's my friend, and his name is Carlos Noel, and he hails from a little community of Labrie. Welcome, Carlos.
Thank you.
Carlos is, if any of you have been following the news and whatever, Carlos is a systems engineer who has developed this fantastic piece of equipment called a solar-powered brine neutralizing desalination plant, or desalinator as we call it. And he's here tonight to talk to us about this fantastic invention of his. But before we go into that, and we give you a little background about Carlos and who he is, where he's from, and how he got to be an inventor, an experimenter, a systems engineer. So Carlos, tell us a little bit about you and your background and who you are. Introduce yourself to the St. Lucian public.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank Laura for having me on the show. I'm certified in thermodynamics, control of mobile robots, and systems engineering. Most of what I do came about because my dad was a power station operator. And growing up, normal kids would have toys and normal toys playing with, but I fortunately used to play with his test instruments, and on our spare time we used to follow him to the power station, hang outside, and I would spend most of my time in the junkyard by the power station collecting old parts from the power station. So growing up, this is how I started the whole inventing, taking things apart. And fortunately for me, he allowed me to open up the family TV, which never worked afterwards, and the stereo, which never worked afterwards. This is how I really got into it, just being curious about how things work and how they are put together.
So you started off just being a curious mind and just going into things, but give us some idea as to how you got to here. So you started off as a regular little boy, and what was the defining moment when you realized, I'm just not really interested in transformers and fast cars and the regular toys that little boys play with?
What I would do most times is look at flaws in anything, in machines, in systems. And taking them apart, putting them back together, it got kind of boring after a while. So I started modifying them, adding in improving the efficiency of most of the systems. And it just took off from there.
All right. So now there's a fantastic little thing, and I think the minister responsible for innovation calls it a wow moment. A wow moment. When she realized that, above everything else, what was really amazing about you is that you didn't feel that you fit into the school system, like the education system as we know it in St. Lucia. So you wrote your common entrance and you passed your common entrance. There's a little tidbit about that, right? There's a little anecdote around the passing your common entrance. Yeah. Tell us about that.
Wow, should I go into this?
Yes, you need to go into it.
What happened when I passed my common entrance? Some people were surprised that I actually passed.
And why?
Because
he spent half of his time outside of the classroom. Is what he's afraid to say. He spent half of his time outside of the classroom because he was a disruptive little boy, right? Not really paying attention to the regular things.
I spent most of the classroom hours reading my electronic books underneath the desk whilst the teacher was talking.
Right.
I hope none of them are looking at this right now.
So you were constantly in trouble.
Yeah,
constantly at odds with your teachers. But then common entrance rolls around and you write and you pass. Yeah. And what was the comment that was made?
Oh, even Carly's too.
Yes, when you wrote the exams, right? Yeah, it was so amazing. Yeah, so anyway, you wrote the common entrance and you went to junior sec before junior secondary, and you did your first 3 years there.
Yes.
And then what happened?
What I realized is the teaching system did not really work for me because my brain operates in a different dimension. I to understand things, I have to see it in 3D to really understand it. If you tell it to me, I'll have to translate that into an actual image in my head. So I decided, okay, I can learn, but I will learn on my own pace on my own system. I will use my own system of learning because I will not spend the rest of my life in school and not learn anything.
Now the reason why I ask you that is because a lot of times we're so inundated with the fact that we churn out a lot of illiterates. So like now in St. Lucia we have what's called USE, Universal Secondary School Education, but I call it useless because I think we're churning out more illiterate, functionally illiterate children than ever before, because more children, and that's, I think, is a matter of quantity. More children are going through the system, but not a lot of children are adequately identified with the issues, the problems that they have, the learning disabilities that they have, and they're just, it's like cattle. They just go through the system, and a lot of them are not learning anything. A lot of them, not that they can't learn, but they, like you, they think and they learn a little bit differently. And they go through the entire school life thinking, I'm dumb, I'm not learning. But it's the system that's not catering to the way they think, which is why I was really pressing you. And there's a point to all of that. So I was pressing you to tell us a little bit about your background. So when you got to Form 3, you decided that system was just not working for you. And you decided what?
I decided to deliberately fail the exam. But I finished it in about 2 minutes. I just ticked everything and I sat there.
And you sat there.
Yeah.
And you effectively flunked out of school and decided and at that time you got another opportunity to repeat the form and to write the exam, but you decided no, you did not want, so you in effect dropped out of school. So you dropped out of school in the 3rd form. And you decided to do what? I continue inventing and experimenting things.
I continued experimenting. I was fascinated with Nikola Tesla. I recreated a lot of his experiments in my room, lab, junkyard. I built a lot of things. Also, I got involved. I actually joined a group called SETI. It's Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, which I built a radio telescope in my room. And thank God I did not get any communication back because I would probably run out of the room.
But you did a lot of these things. You did a lot of experimenting and whatever. And so let's fast forward a little bit. And you're now a young man. You've tried the work scene. You've worked, went in there, demanded jobs, got fired, or pretty much walked out of the job.
Yeah.
And then you're at 20 and you decided, you need to take life a little seriously because to continue to do these experiments and to invent things and to, well, at this point you weren't really inventing things, we're just recreating experiments.
Yeah, recreating.
Yeah. You decided you needed a source of funding and you
Yeah.
decided to take life a little bit more seriously
Yeah.
because daddy was not always going to fund.
Yes, he really supported me. He bought me a lot of high tech test equipment. He didn't hesitate to just sacrifice.
So you were very lucky in a sense because you had a father that believed in you and
Yes.
thought that okay, he's not in school but he's still learning something and I'm going to encourage him to learn in his own way,
And
in his own pace.
That helped a lot. It pushed me. Getting the support from my dad, buying me the equipment and letting me destroy his precious TV and his stereo. I was like priceless.
Right. So you've done all of that and now you decided to do what?
When I left school, obviously I had to work, to fund my crazy experiments. I actually went to work at a factory. I spent one day because I wanted to work quality control, and they didn't allow me to because I had to spend time on the production line. I left that. I tried a few other jobs, and my sister and I decided to start a gym in Labrie, a bodybuilding gym and fitness. It worked out for a while, but those things, it takes commitment to stick to a workout routine. So we realized it was kind of dying out, and we decided to buy a boat to complement that.
And so that's where the fisherman comes in.
Yeah. The boat was intended for doing tours, and then we ended up doing sport fishing, not commercial fishing.
Right. And I think a lot of you have a following because a lot of people think about you as the fisherman.
Yeah, commercial
turned,
fishing.
yes,
Yeah.
the fisherman turned.
So it's kind of
inventor.
confusing for
it's-
some people.
Yes, so they're thinking a commercial fisherman turned inventor
Yeah.
because of you technically a fisherman because you take people out
Sport
to
fishing.
sport fish,
Yeah, but
right?
it's fishing.
You're right, it's fishing, but it's not the kind of fishing that we think
Yeah,
in our
it's not
heads
commercial
as commercial fishing. So you're doing that. You've taken your little packet and you did a pache, like we would say, gone down to Soufrière with your sister. You bought a boat and you decided you're going to do that. And you did that for how many years?
I did that for about 15 years. I spent 15 years in Soufrière. Yeah.
Doing
Doing
that.
tours and
And the
sport
fishing.
fishing. Yeah. Well, I left Soufrière and came back to Labrie. Yeah. That is where I finally decided, okay, I need to pursue my real self, my real dreams,
Yes.
and who I am. I love fishing, but it doesn't move me.
Right.
I love building and taking things apart and experimenting.
So you decided to come back to Labrie.
Yeah.
And then we're speeding through this, right? We're speeding through this just to give you a background as to who this young man is, what he is capable of. And so we're not going to go into detail as to everything that he's done when he came back out of Soufrière. But it's important to know the timeline so you can have an understanding of where the things that he went through to be at this juncture that he is right now. So you came back to Labrie and you did a few projects in the Labrie community. You did the
Yes,
bridge.
I was involved in the electrifying the bridge, channel markers for the bay, lighting on the dock, and the famous desalinator.
And famous desalinator. And there we're now going to reintroduce at this point our second guest this evening. He's no stranger to us because he was with us 2 weeks ago, Mr. Giles Romulus from Jeff. And last couple of weeks he was here. He was with the aquaponics gentleman. And this week he's here with Carlis on the desalinator. And that's where you come in and tell us a little bit about how Jeff became this mentor, this guide for Carlis in terms of his desalinating plant and where he is right now.
Well, good evening, Laura, and good evening, everybody in TV Land. I'm delighted to be here again, once again. And
Thank you for coming.
You had promised that you would feature us once a month.
Yes.
And presumably this is the once a month
The once a month.
event. In order for our guests to understand how our program converge with Carlis, we are an international program in 124 countries, and we do projects in everything from alternative energy to biodiversity to chemical reduction in food systems to reduction of pollution, etc. About 2 years ago, we were introducing a new methodology to St. Lucia to assess the resilience of communities in the context of disasters. It was a Saturday afternoon, very hot. We were in the Library Boys School, upstairs in the Library Boys School. And there are about, maybe about 30 persons there. And we were talking about the impacts of hurricanes on Library and what are some of the impacts that happened. And what essentially we wanted to determine was whether or not Library was ready for the changes brought about by climate change. One of the risks that was identified was the risk of potential droughts and the impacts on Library. And that developed into a conversation. How would Library get water if, for example, a major storm destroys all the systems and you have no water, or if there's an extensive 3-month or even 6-month drought in the context of climate change? And as we spoke, there was a little gentleman sitting in the front row to the left, very quiet, had not said nothing. And I wondered who he was. I was facilitating the discussion. And after a while, the discussion was beginning to dwindle, and then he said, somebody had suggested rainwater harvesting systems. Mm-hmm. But this gentleman said, well, yes, if we have rainwater harvesting system and rain falls, it's fine. But if there's no rain for 6 months, what happens to the system? Where do you get the source of water? And then I threw the question back at him, and he said, well, the sea. And I said, the sea. And I said, do you know how difficult it is to do desalination work? Do you know how expensive it is? And do you know what the consequences of the brine is on the coastal zone by creating dead zones? And he said, well, we'll use solar. That's how he said it. And the brine thing, he had not figured it out yet. But as I looked at him, I saw an intensity and an interest. So I challenged him and I said, okay, come back with a design to us that works, that uses solar, and so on. He came back.
Did you really think, though, that he would come back to you with a solution to the brine? The solar part is not so difficult, but the brine situation, did you really think that he was going to come back to you with that solution?
Well, I used to be a teacher before. I taught at St. Mary's College, and I have a good teaching rapport with students, and I've lectured as well. And when I looked at the intensity in his eye, I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you a planning grant. We gave him a planning grant of about, I think, $2,000 to go under the benefit cost ratios and the whole thing. So he had to hire someone to assist him to work out the figures to see, is that really something that we should invest in? And he also had to get assistance in designing the system. When he came back to us and we brought it to our board, we realized that there was some merit in what he was saying. The brine thing still had not been worked out yet. So we gave him approval on condition that the brine issue would be neutralized. And surprisingly, after experiment after experiment, he came up with a system that actually worked. Now the thing about that system, the individual parts are not unique. What Calais has been able to do is to bring parts that they're into one movable, workable system in which we are producing water, which the Minister of Agriculture of Antigua just recently, yesterday, said is perhaps one of the most exciting experiments he's seen.
But before we go into...
But let me just say something. What the description of Calais' life is not atypical to inventors. In fact, what Calais has described there is the typical evolution of a great mind. A lot of great minds you've had in the world have actually been ostracized, put aside, thought to be the worst mathematician in terms of Einstein, and so on. And some of them are dyslexic, and so on. And we as society, the so-called normal ones, say, oh, these are the marginalized ones. Let's put them aside. And sometimes we end up throwing potential great minds
exactly.
aside.
And I was just about to come to that because, and it's funny you talked about Einstein and the worst mathematicians. I was just thinking in my head, recently we had a conversation and somebody could not add 7 plus 7 and somebody couldn't determine that 8 to 8 was 12 hours. But that person was such a genius in my mind. That was amazing, the way the brain works in terms of the simplicity of the simplest of things. We're like, ugh. But then give a complex challenge and how that mind is able to break it down and to get a solution that most of us who are institutionalized, learned people could not think of.
Yes. So when we challenged Carlos and he came back and now great inventors need to have very high threshold for experimenting and making mistakes too. The solution culture teaches us not to make mistakes. So we have to be first all the time. And that in itself is counter inventive in the sense. So Carlos had that latitude to go and experiment and come up. I'm sure if he explains it, he'll see how many mistakes he made, how many. But in the end, he came up with a workable system, the first generation system. And that we promoted big time because the project we funded was partly funded by Australian Aid, AusAid, as a community-based adaptation project for St. Lucia in disaster, post-disasters periods. So when I described it to my colleagues at the UN in New York and even around the world, I said, wow, a fisherman doing that? And so everybody started to ask a lot of questions about it. And in the end, we thought it was a fantastic invention to be, for Carlos to be able to stay in a small community like Labrie and read. And we have to bring in the element of research. Our young people, a lot of us have an aversion to research. Carlos will tell you he reads profusely. He reads endlessly. Why? Because he's gathering information that he will use maybe now or in the future. And of course, he understands a lot of the science that's behind it. So for Carlos to be able to do that, he has to understand physics, he has to understand chemistry, he has to understand engineering, he has to understand welding, a little bit of carpentry.
Yes, computer.
Computers, systems, and so on. So all of that learned on his own.
Yes.
So when you have a passion and a penchant for something, and you get a little nudge, a little environment that is enabling, this is what you have: an inventor in a small island developing state, in a community of Labrie doing great things.
Absolutely.
And this second generation is headed for Nauru in the Pacific.
We'll talk about that after the break. But it just, hearing you speak, and if you hadn't said that you were a teacher before, I totally get it. But having said all of this, it just brings home how limiting our education system is in St. Lucia. It's sad. It hurts my heart to think that there are countless little boys and little girls out there who have been made to feel worthless and useless because they could not fit into mainstream education in St. Lucia, and so you're just a waste of time. I'm not even going to take the time to deal with you. I had a conversation with an adult who had a child who was not performing very well, and her whole solution to the problem was just take her out of school and let her do whatever, and she'll take care of her because it's her daughter and she cares about her and all of that. And I'm thinking, why don't you lobby your parliamentary rep? Why don't you lobby the Minister of Government of Education? Why don't you lobby your government to do something to revamp the way our children learn? Why is it that it's always a problem with the child? And I hear even teachers sometimes say that, what is wrong with you? Like in a classroom setting, when you can't grasp a concept, everybody else is grasping it except you or a couple of kids. And they go, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you picking this up? As if the problem is with you, but you just learn differently. And I think Carlos has demonstrated that and has highlighted that. And in a little while, we're going to talk a lot more about the desalinator and how we came out to, invent this whole system that's different to desalinators that exist right now. So we'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll have a more in-depth chat with our first guest, Carlos Noel, and his invention, the desalinator, brine neutralizing management system. See you at the other side of the break. Welcome back, and thank you for staying tuned to what's happening now with Laura, with my special guest, inventor Carlos Noel, and Jeff Program Coordinator, Mr. Giles Romulus. Between 2/3 and 3/4 of the Earth's surface is water. That's about 71% of the Earth's surface. Yet humanity is facing a water crisis, with a demand expected to outstrip supply by 40% in 2030 if current trends continue. Water scarcity affects every continent on planet Earth and was listed in 2015 by the World Economic Forum as the largest global risk in terms of potential impact over the next decade. 1/3 of the global population, which is about 2 billion people, live under conditions of severe water scarcity at least 1 month of the year. 500 million people in the world face severe water scarcity all year round, while half of the world's largest cities experience water scarcity. So where is all of Earth's surface water if 71% of the Earth's surface is covered by water? Well, the oceans hold about 96.5% of all Earth's water, and the remaining 3.5% exists in the air, rivers, lakes, ice caps, and glaciers, in the ground as soil moisture, and in aquifers, and even in you and your pets. Water that has seeped into the Earth's crust, groundwater, is more difficult to see, yet all these forms of water that I spoke about earlier are part of a dynamic, interrelated water system, an interrelated flow that we call the water cycle. People tend to think that the amount of water on the planet is unlimited, yet the amount of water on the Earth will actually stay the same. Of the water on Earth, 97.3% is oceans, inland seas, and salt lakes. The remaining 2.7% is fresh water. Again, that is ice caps, glaciers, groundwater, freshwater lakes, atmosphere, and rivers. Now, although a mere 0.014% of water on Earth is both fresh and easily accessible, technically, there is a sufficient amount of fresh water on a global scale for humanity to get by. Shocking? So why is there a water scarcity issue? This is due in part to an unequal distribution exacerbated by climate change, resulting in some very wet and some very dry geographic locations, plus a sharp rise in global freshwater demand in recent decades driven by industry. Climate change is so real. We see it manifested in the rampant wildfires experienced currently in Europe and the flash floodings in North America. Hard as it may be to believe, Caribbean islands such as St. Lucia, Barbados, Antigua, and Jamaica compare to those in the Western Sahara and parts of the Middle East. So says the World Resources Institute. In addition, changes in weather patterns in the Caribbean due to climate change are exacerbating existing water challenges. Places are not getting rain where they used to, while others are getting rain where they weren't. Which brings us to this show and the desalination project that we talked about a little earlier. Desalination, as Mr. Romulus mentioned earlier, alluded to, is not new to the Caribbean. It's not new. It's not a new technology. But extracting clean water from seawater is becoming an increasingly integral part of the region's search for water security. Desalination isn't without its challenges, however. By far, the biggest and most obvious relates to energy consumption. Huge amounts of power are required to operate commercial-scale desalination, power that is often produced by importing expensive fossil fuels. And we all know about the effects of fossil fuels on our environment. With large natural gas deposits offshore, Trinidad and Tobago is a rare exception to such import dependency. Energy typically amounts to, and that is very important, 1/3 of an archetypal plant's operating costs, increasing to as much as 2/3 in some cases. Alongside its dependency on expensive, not to mention carbon-intensive power supply, environmentalists have raised concerns over the impacts of large-scale desalination on marine life. Luckily for us in Laborie, we have an app for that. A solar-powered brine neutralizing desalinator. And now we get back to it. And I went through all of this to set the stage for you to understand that though we have water on Earth, and that while typically theoretically, there is sufficient water to supply all of Earth's needs, the location of such water is not always where we need it to be. And so there is always going to be this demand in certain geographical areas for fresh, accessible water. In addition to which, we as humans, we're growing rapidly, and industry is placing a heavy demand on such a resource. And which is why we need a little, what Carlos describes as disruptive thinking and disruptive inventions to deal with those kinds of situations. So, Mr. Romulus,
Hey, Laura,
over to you.
thank you. There are 2 points I need to make. The program that I manage in St. Lucia, or that is run globally, cannot fund an individual like Carlos. So if Carlos had come to us by himself alone and said, hey, I need a grant, I would have to say, Carlos, we can't fund you because this is not part of our mandate, part of our rules. So we have to big up the Library Fishers Cooperative, who saw that idea, who bought that idea, and was able to present it as a project from the Library Fishers Cooperative at a time when Carlos also sat on the executive of the Library Fishers. So that first generation desalinator was funded and was made possible through the Library Fishers Cooperative. And once he had gone through that process, he went for the learning curve, and then that brought us to this second generation, which he'll talk about. Another point I need to make about in St. Lucia as well, I think it was the Minister of Agriculture recently talking about we're losing something like 40 to 60% of the treated water in our pipe systems, which suggests that the systems are very corroded. And if we are losing all that treated water, the amount of energy that goes into the production and treatment of the water, and for us to be losing it, that is a significant problem. And as water shortages begin to increase, that becomes even a major factor in the calculation and so on. So Carlos is doing something that I believe St. Lucia will need and communities will need over time. And fortunately for us, he's getting the international exposure for Nauru. And I was very pleased when it was a colleague in the UN that called me and said, we heard about this project in St. Lucia. And we heard Nauru has a problem and they're putting out requests for proposals. And I quickly sent an email to the president of the Library Fishers and to Carlos. And Carlos responded. And it's because of that response, Carlos is today where he is in terms of coming up with a second generation desalinator, which is brine neutralized, very important. In fact, the Minister of Antigua, the Minister of Agriculture was telling me that the production, Antigua is about almost 100% run on desalinated water. And a lot of the brine is pumped beyond the continental shelf. Now, and most of it is generated from electricity power. So the carbon footprint of water generation is significant for countries like Antigua.
And
But this is also another issue problem as well.
Yeah, that is very concerning for you as Jeff, because because you're looking at everything that you fund from an environmental safe perspective.
Well, do no harm. We want to do no harm to the environment, but we want to make sure that people can survive and live a happy life without adversely impacting on the environment. And that invention fits squarely within our mandate and our mission. And we're delighted to fund it and for Carlos to go through that learning curve to become where he is now. Absolutely.
Wonderful. So Carlos, now take us back to where you started. I mean, Mr. Romulus gave us a quite stirring account of you presenting or suggesting the water desalinating plant, and I can well imagine the pushback, because any environmentalist would be very concerned about desalination. We know the carbon footprint of desalination. We know the effects on marine life that desalination is. But for our viewers out there, explain a little bit more about especially the marine life effect of desalination.
Okay. Brine, it's after working 2 years with brine, it's extremely toxic. It has no oxygen. The density, it's a very high density liquid. It sinks to the bottom of the ocean, and it could kill marine life and plant life.
Tell us what brine is, because I think there's some of us out there who we know brine as that thing that comes in the pail for the salted tails and whatnot.
It's almost the same thing.
All right, so just break it down for us as a little bit. It's a byproduct of the desalination process.
Yeah. Brine is, well, let me go to seawater. Seawater is measured, the salinity is measured in parts per thousand. Seawater is actually 35 parts per thousand. the brine, when you compress the seawater through the membranes, it the salt stays back with less liquid. Now that in itself becomes more salty. The salinity of the brine is 60 parts per thousand, which is about double the salinity of seawater. This is like the byproduct. After the salt is squeezed out, it stays back because it cannot pass through the reverse osmosis membranes, because it's look at it as like you do in your lime juice. The seed stays back in the strainer. It works the same way, but at a microscopic level. So the salt just stays back, just like the lime seed stays back in the strainer.
Right. Now, I got before we even started the show, I put out the promo for the show, and somebody said to me, I hope it takes out all of the microbes and in the seawater, because our seas are very polluted. So the person, I'm not going to say who, because I know he's going to call a little later on, but he was very concerned, and that has been one of his pet projects, one of his issues with our water, our seawater. Your plant.
Yes. The okay. I'll refer to it as holes. Pause. The holes in the membrane, it's 0.005 microns. That's how small it is, and the smallest bacteria is 0.05. So there's no way it's gonna pass through the hole, just like the lime seed would pass through.
Okay. So that takes care of.
Yeah.
Of that. So
I should come in there as well, Laura, because one of the things we made sure that Calais did was to get an independent study of the desalinator, because we were not going to promote it as something that is authentic and workable without. So we got him to hire CAFA, Caribbean Public Health Agency, and they came on board and studied the input water. And unfortunately, I would have to give a black mark to Labrie tonight. The water quality in Labrie Bay is of a certain standard that is questionable. I will not go into any more detail. And the output water that came out was fantastic. It met international standards. But more importantly, the report from CAFA stated clearly, not only did it give us potable water, but it extracted all the bacteria. So it met World Health Organization standards. What else did you need? Exactly. Independent confirmation from a ISO 2000 laboratory in St. Lucia and Oman was what we needed to really make this invention what it is now. That is why it's going places now.
Right. That's all the validation that it needs. So you started off with the fisheries, and you did your first generation water desalinator, the desalinator plant. What is the difference between that first one? Talk to us a little bit about the first one, the first generation, and how the second generation supersedes the first generation.
Mobility. The second generation is more mobile. It's lighter. It has the first generation. The brine management system was a manual operation. I had to do it manually and calculate whilst I'm doing it, and use timers.
So it was not user friendly. So in other words, not anybody and everybody could use it.
It was just a research platform. But I look at it as a research platform. The second generation, everything is done with an onboard computer microcontroller. It controls the whole brine management system. So anybody could use it. It's very user friendly.
Right. Now, in terms of the brine neutralizing management system, how does it differ from the first one, the second generation? How does it differ from the first one? Or is there any difference at all?
No. The only difference in the brine management system, the second generation is compact. Everything is in the unit on the trailer, and it's run by a computer, not by manual operation. Yeah. And the capacity, it has a high capacity. The first one was about 400 gallons a day. The second generation is 1,000 gallons a day. Okay.
Now, Jazz, back to you. This week, yesterday, in fact, there was a contingency which came down from the OECS in Labrie to view his. So before we get to you, that second generation is as a direct result of officials in Nauru wanting your system, and that is going to be shipped out to Nauru in a couple. It's going to be commissioned in a couple
about
of
2
weeks,
weeks,
or
yeah.
shipped rather in a couple of weeks. And once it gets there, you're going to go over to Nauru to
Yes.
commission it. And it's so user friendly that the people over there would be able to deal with it, even without high tech.
Yes, and one of the unique features, well, main features, I could remote monitor it or control it also.
Right,
I
so
turn
you
the switches
could
on
stay in St. Lucia and troubleshoot
Yeah.
over in the Pacific
So
if
it
it
takes
needs be.
sort of guesswork out of if there's a problem. I could actually diagnose it and tell them exactly what to do.
Right, and in comes Antigua and the OACS.
Yes. In fact, the Director General of the OACS was in Costa Rica about 2 weeks ago, and he called me on the phone. He said, Giles, I have the Minister of Agriculture here who has a problem with water and so on, and I heard about this project. I said, fine. I want to bring him to St. Lucia. I said, fine. I called Carlos, I called a few people, and I said, of course, when can he come? And they landed on the weekend, and they drove down to Labrie. First of all, stopping at the project that we discussed last week. Well,
2
3
weeks
weeks
ago.
ago, yeah. Mr. Jameson's aquaponics facility. They were very impressive with that. And then we took another drive south to Labrie. And the minister was asked a lot of questions to Carlos. He was very inquisitive. He asked a lot of questions, good questions though, I thought, to bring out the genius in Carlos. And what we understood though is that Antigua is not looking for potable water of WHO standards. What they're looking for are desalinators that can produce water for use in agriculture. So they want to use groundwater and brackish water that they have in Antigua. So the standards that we are aspiring to, if Carlos goes into production for Antigua, is going to be less. And he's looking for 100,000 gallons a day. So Carlos is, if Carlos gets the job, or if it is he's asked to do it, he's going to have to design a system that is a lot more prolific in terms of quantities of water per day. And I'm sure it's not beyond Carlos to do. I think if he has reached 1,000, he's gone from 400 to 1,000 in the matter of a year.
I think
100,000 is around the corner.
I think if people know Carlos like I do, he'll say piece of cake.
Easy, very easy.
No problem, no problem.
So I think he's getting a lot of push from the OACS. The Director General is pushing that big time. So we're hoping that a letter will come from the Minister of Agriculture very soon of Antigua. And Carlos will be on to his next, maybe third generation.
Right. So the lines are now open, and the number to call is 451-9788. And I think we have our very first call online. Thank you for calling. You're on the air. We lost this caller, but still keep trying. The number to call is 451-9788. You can send us your WhatsApp messages at 284-6536, or you can send us your emails at laurajapier@gmail.com. That's laurajapier@gmail.com. WhatsApp messages 284-6536, and you can always call us on the air at 451-9788. So, Antigua is your next big... We have a call? Thank you for calling. You're on the air. Yes, good evening.
Good evening. Congratulations. Yes, I'm just curious as to what happens to the brine. How is it neutralized?
How is the brine neutralized?
Well, I cannot really go into the details of that, but it is being neutralized very efficiently.
You're asking him to give you his intellectual
Yeah.
property, and that's not going to happen. but be assured that the brine is neutralized, and it has been tested
Yeah, that's
and
been
proven that it is neutralized.
And there's an independent report to confirm
Absolutely.
that from CAFA. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for calling. Yes, so tell us a little bit more. We have another call. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
I am very impressed with Calix, right?
Callis.
Alice.
Okay, can you turn down the volume on your television, please? We're getting a feedback.
All right. Yeah,
Yes.
is that better?
Yes, it's much better. Thank you.
Yeah. So I was saying I'm very impressed with this young man's, what he has achieved so far, and I think we in St. Lucia should be really, really proud of him. And I also would like to say that I note that how a parent deals with their children has a lot to do with how they develop in life, and that should be a lesson for a lot of parents out there. You know, you support your children and you guide them, and look at what has come out as a result of this.
And caller, you know the most amazing thing? His father was this pivotal, this all-important role model in his life. His father. How often do we get to hear about fathers playing that kind of role?
Exactly. Is your father alive? He's still alive, right?
Very much alive and very much a proud papa.
He should be really, really, really proud of you. And I am proud of you as a mother, and St. Lucia should be proud of you. I have a question, though. What is being done about is it the patenting his invention? You know, is that something that y'all are real? Because we wouldn't want to hear that anybody has taken his idea, and you know how the world is today. So I would just like to hear a little more about that.
Thank you so much for your contribution.
Very, very good question, ma'am, for asking. In fact, we are looking into that. We're going to seek some assistance from the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. I'm in discussion with the Director General, and we're going to see how we can fast track the patenting process, because in St. Lucia you don't have the process well developed yet, and we may have to use an American patent system, or maybe go to Trinidad or Guyana.
Wonderful. We have another call online. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.
Very
night,
good.
sir.
Excellent. Congratulations.
Is that one of my favorite callers? Is this Mr. George?
Well, I want to know whether the guy's name is Calix.
No, it's not your namesake. It's Carlis,
Oh,
Karlis.
Well, close enough, though.
Close enough. And you know the funny
Thank
thing?
you very much. Brilliant, very brilliant.
You know, Mr. George, the funny thing is, I've known this man all my life, and only this year I realized that his name is not Calix. I called him Calix for decades, and his name is Carlis, Karlis. So, yeah.
Yes, very, very good. Excellent project. I must congratulate you. And very, very good for St. Lucia. The question that was raised earlier on about the, what you call it?
The patent.
The patenting, yes. Is very important. You must do that very fast.
Yes.
Now, I wanted to find out from you about the waste product is the brine. Now, the brine is maybe a very high concentration of sodium chloride, which is salt, common salt, which is excellent for saltfish, manufacturing of saltfish. Now, since you're coming from the origin, the morphogenesis, the radix of the whole project is the fishermen. Why don't you use that same byproduct and make it into a value-added product by the production of saltfish? Have you given that a thought?
Yes. One of my first the first process I used was evaporation to get rid of the brine. Well, that in itself was very energy consuming and slow. So I don't actually get the salt from the brine. It's still in a liquid form.
So could that be your next project, though?
You could also use the liquid form for making the saltfish. You know, you saturate the flesh, the fish, in the brine,
Yes.
and then make the saltfish. Or you can make it in terms like how you make our saw. You know,
as long as there's a market for it.
That's a good one.
Yeah, as long as there's a market for it, then
That is something that he could
Yeah.
totally look
Yeah.
into and sink his teeth
that's a very
into.
good idea.
in other words, what I'm saying is that instead of getting you use your byproduct to get even value added and a greater
Exactly,
product.
and that's excellent because our local or our national dish is green figs and saltfish. So why not make our
Yeah.
own saltfish instead? And we used to at one point in Labrie, actually. We used to do our own saltfish. So that's something to
Or
think
try-
about.
just try
Okay, that's
fish.
what I wanted to say about that.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Okay,
so
thank
much for
you.
your contribution as
Thank you
usual.
very
We
much.
appreciate it. Carlis, you know how you always say your thing is you do these promos not because of yourself, but you want to reach other children out there who possibly are going through what you went through as a child, and you want to reach them and you want to let them know that it's not all over, you know, you could do something. Here, I've got a message. Just, I'll read that message to you in a little bit. We have a call online. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Hey, I just was wondering the price of one of these units.
Good question.
I didn't
The price
The price.
like the cost of the
Yes.
of the
system.
yes.
Yeah, the Generation 2.
Let's see, Generation 2. About $45,000 US.
Oh, that's not bad.
You thinking of getting one of those?
Yeah, I'm thinking about getting one. You know, to make some money off of it.
Backyard
I mean,
desalinator.
but the thing about it, I mean,
Yeah,
we're,
my backyard desalinator
yes,
and,
because
you
we're
know,
hit so,
After a storm, you know, you
exactly in this region. We've been hit so much with those hurricanes, especially last year. We had two super storms, and that just decimated our
yeah,
sister
there was
island.
a shortage of water all over the
Exactly,
place, especially
exactly.
at the hotels and stuff.
Exactly. So there you have it. We have an app for that in Labrie. We're going places.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your contribution. So, Carlos,
Hey, Abby.
yes. So I was telling you, Carlos, that there's somebody who sent a WhatsApp. I'm going to read it to you. Good evening. My 9-year-old is so glued to the television, engrossed in the conversation. He is fascinated with science. So this topic has him glued. So you're reaching the children, which is one of your
Yep.
your dreams, to reach
what I
children and to get them more interested in science and understanding that even though you're not, you know, you can make it in the education system, there's hope.
Yes.
Right. We have another call online. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Yeah, has anyone looked at patent? Has he got a patent for what he's doing?
Yes. Somebody called earlier and asked about that very same question, and the answer is yes. We are working on that, or they are working on that.
Thank you.
Okay, that's the sum total of your contribution. Okay, thank you so much for calling. We have another call online. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Hello?
Hi, good evening. You're on the air.
Hello?
Yes, good night.
Hello? Good night.
Yes, good night. If you turn down the volume, hold on, sir. If you turn down the volume on your
What's the
television,
gentleman's name?
his name is Carlos Noel.
What is the gentleman's name?
If you turn down the volume on your television and listen through the telephone,
Turn down the volume for me. What's the gentleman's name?
his name is Carlos Noel.
Okay, just Calix.
Yes, Carlos.
But I'm saying we need this gentleman in St. Lucia so much, and then you're sending him in Antigua, and the son is going to Antigua.
Weapon tattoo. I mean, this is Antigua came to him. Antigua, and
Yes,
he has been doing this. The first generation is 2 years old or thereabouts. Yes.
Yeah, about it.
And so we've known about it for 2 years, but what have we done about it? He can't just sit there. He's got bills to pay, you know. He's got bills to pay. So he's going off to Nauru, and then from Nauru he's going to Antigua, and maybe hopefully by the time he comes back from Antigua, St. Lucia would have had their act together, and he can stay home.
Okay.
Yes.
But if he go at all, we're really going to miss him, you know.
Well, he'll come back.
No.
He has every reason to come back to St. Lucia.
St. Lucia, nice. I'm coming back.
Good promo. Good
Yeah.
promo.
Yes.
Okay.
He'll be back. He'll be back. Have no fear.
African colleagues are also calling as well, right, Carlos?
Yes.
You're getting calls from Africa as well?
Yeah. Nigeria.
Okay.
Yeah, so this young man is going places, and and I keep saying that, and I tease him all the time about it. You know, always in trouble in school. Just because his brain works a little bit differently than the rest of us. And our education system, and I have to say this, people, our education system is so broken, it does not accommodate people like Carlos. It does not facilitate the learning process for people like Carlos. And just imagine if Carlos were to decide, I'm just dropping out of school and just forgetting about this, and he didn't have a father or a sister to encourage him, or a mom who's always there, regardless of whatever he does. Where would he be? Would we be sitting here today?
But it's not only education, Laura. It's the fact that the inventive mind must also be a risk taker. And Carlos has taken a lot of
risks.
And if you really sit down and talk to Carlos, how many wrong turns he made. But that is part of the inventive process. You are supposed to make mistakes and learn from them.
Exactly.
And so on. And all the great inventors go through that process.
Fail is your first attempt at learning, right? We have another call online. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Hi, good night.
Good night.
Good night, sir.
I would like to first applaud Carlos for his great achievement.
Thank you.
Quick question with reference to the water. If someone wants to taste the water, or how can they taste the water from the system?
Come on down to the library.
We had a tasting.
We had a tasting yesterday.
The minister from Antigua and his chief agricultural officer was there. The head of the JEF, the chairperson of the JEF was there. A number of persons were there. And I can tell you, sir, from my experience, the quality of the water is excellent, extraordinary. I would take it and put it in my refrigerator any day, and so on. I believe it's one of the best quality waters I've ever tasted, and it was confirmed by our visitors from the Northeastern Caribbean.
So, having said that, does that mean that you could package that water and sell it?
That's a good question.
That's a good one. Maybe that's something that Carlos may decide to go into a little later on, after he gets a little bored with desalinators. But that's a good suggestion. That's absolutely something that can possibly. But Giles, you also have. Go ahead, sir.
Last question on the water. What have you done with the water you've produced so far? Do you store it? Do you send it in the pipe? What have you done with that water?
It's just basically testing the pH and testing for microbes and making sure the system runs.
So the water that is desalinated is not stored. The whole point of the desalinator, if I get it right, the whole point of the desalinator is to be used in the event of disasters where there's no water, so we have no pipe-borne water. Then we can activate it on a community level and supply the community with water. So right now, the water is not being to say he's producing water daily. He's not doing that. That's Wasco's job, to provide water for the citizens of St. Lucia. But in the event of a superstorm, in the event of another Hurricane Maria, then on a community level, he can activate that desalinator, and the community can have access to potable water. Did I get it right?
Yeah, all right. Many thanks for that. This is actually Jameson, and I have some knowledge of that, but I just wanted some more clarifications that the general public can understand.
Great,
I'm
wonderful.
also a Jeff grantee.
You were the last guy who was here with us last month. Yes. Wonderful.
So let's just have a little more discussion on what is being done with the water. Some people do want to know what is being done with the water.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your contribution.
You're most welcome. Thanks so much.
Wonderful. Now, I was asking you, asking questions about how you can taste the water, how you can be exposed to what Carlos is doing. You have a big event coming up at the end of the year. Tell us a little bit about that and how Carlos is...
The cat out of the bag at this time.
A little bit,
but okay, this is a promo for it.
Why not?
We are going to expose St. Lucia to some great inventions and projects in the early part of December. And we're going to...
We have a call coming. Hello? You're on the air?
Hello. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello?
Yes, good evening.
Right. I am watching, I'm sitting, and I'm in awe. I'm not too far from library. I'm from Choiseul, so I'm feeling a little way up there too. I'm saying, wow. What I want to say, I know in Barbados, my God, I can't remember which parish, but the households, they use a lot of desalinated household water. They use that water. So the Barbados Water Authority, because there's always some problems with the water, and so for years now, Barbados has been using. So it is not something new as far as Barbados is concerned. And I'm in Barbados pretty often, and I remember even when I use the shower, I have difficulty with the water, and the older folks will say that the water is hard because you don't get that lather that we used to when you take the shower and you use the soap, you wash. So, and it does have a little, because I'm so used with my St. Lucian water, so it does have a little, to me, a little
salty taste.
Yes. Yeah. But in Barbados, when I go up again, I'm supposed to go back again in November, God willing. I will find out.
But you know,
exactly.
Yes,
so Barbados do use.
But you know the thing about it, I used to frequent Barbados as well, and I totally understand. And my first experience with hard water was in Barbados. This water is nothing like the water generated in Barbados. Yes. Absolutely nothing. There's no aftertaste. You don't even know that you're not drinking spring water or distilled water. It is fantastic. You need to come down to Labrie and check out Carlos and sample the water so you can tell the people in Barbados that in St. Lucia we can get it right. What's that?
I've been an educator for the better part of my life. I retired just two years ago, and I was principal of a primary school in Castries, and I concurred with you on many things about our children and how we are quick to label them, and there I just pictured myself as a class teacher, myself when I walk through the classrooms and the teachers, they have this little child on the side because the child cannot learn. Well, they've come up with special ed, but still it is so limited. There is so much that I don't think the educators here have understood as far as special ed is concerned. Absolutely. So let me say, hail to you. Carlos is the name. Let me say hail to you. And it was good that whilst you were not attending to the teacher, but you were using the time wisely. At the time, they couldn't see that. And I too have reflected. That's the first time I don't call the talk shows, but this is really, really, really very educational. And I'm happy that a parent called to say that little 9-year-old is glued to the television. So I'm hoping that the Minister of Education is listening at this point, and other members of government, and there for us to take a little page, have discussions with you. And Mr. Romulus is there. I think he can push that too. And you know, when you spoke, Laura, a little earlier on, the children, they engage in the science and technology, the fairs, the school fairs, the science fairs. You understand? So I think so much more can come out of what our young St. Lucian Day has done and is continuing to do. And he would be a very, very, very good role model to talk to children, to tell them, yes, they cannot learn this 2 and 3 and this and that, and to take away the 10's not enough, the 100's not enough, what to do. But whatever, and our teachers need to be trained to see beyond, what that little boy, that little girl can't do, because it is mathematics, it is language arts. The child cannot read to comprehend, and so to get the main idea, so that when they do the common entrance and it's the multiple choice, at times they don't understand, but luck and chance, they shade the right thing, and they go to a secondary school where the learning is fast, and there they become one of those who sink through. Because they can't cope. So I'm very, very, very proud of you as a St. Lucian, and I'm hoping that, as I said, the policymakers will grab you and use you to the benefit of the development of education in St. Lucia. I thank you.
Thank you so much for your contribution. And that is one of the things that Carlos has expressed to me that he wants to do. So when Carlos is on his downtime, we'll be taking him around the schools to introduce him to the students and to get them to understand and to really be jazzed about science. Not just science, but anything that their minds can comprehend, that the minds can conceive. You were talking to us a little bit about
towards the end of the year, before National Day, we're going to have a big national knowledge fair in St. Lucia, in Castries, and we're hoping we can demonstrate a lot of those projects, because that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, we have other projects that are going to even blow your mind even more, where young people, even younger than Carlos, are bringing together technology into a greenhouse. And wouldn't it be wonderful, Laura, if you get up in the morning and you don't have to go to your farm, you pull your smartphone, you look at it and you say, oh, the carrots need 5 millimeters of water. and the temperature by the cabbage is a little too high, and you adjust it on your phone.
Right.
And the humidity is a little bit too high, so you adjust the air conditioning system. Everything is fully solarized. Do you think that is doable?
Of course.
Coming to St. Lucia soon.
Coming
Laura.
soon. Coming to
St. Lucia
coming
soon.
to a location. Yeah, you are. We're
right in St. Lucia, and we funded it. And,
Oh,
and
wow.
Yes, we funded it already.
Nice.
We have examined it, and my board funded it. And I hope I can come here maybe in about 2 months or so and really bring it to
But you know you're going to be
St.
here
Lucia.
once a month.
And it's going to be on display at our Knowledge Fair in December. as
Wonderful.
well.
But you're going to be
All
here
right.
once a month, so
Yes, indeed.
I
Thank you.
absolutely expect, and I hope we get the scoop, like we get it first.
You want
yeah?
it first.
Of course,
We're going to
absolutely.
start to charge you, right? Co-funded, right?
Let's not start talking about charging. Let's not start talking about charging.
Just put it
Yeah,
like-
but we're running quickly. We're running
Okay.
out of time, like really quickly. Just want to read this WhatsApp message. Congratulations to Carlos for making us in Labrie very proud. I do wish him all the best, and his community is behind him to great things. Positive vibes, Labrie behind you, Jalabowi. Yes. So, and Carlos, people are already calling you. Like you have the National Youth Council contacted you for a Lucian Leaders Summit. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, he briefly mentioned it, but I have not really went into the email to really get the gist of it.
Well, let me tell you about it because we're funding
You're funding everything.
We're funding the National Youth Council
Yes,
this year.
talk to us about the
In
Lucian
fact,
Leaders
I have
Summit.
to read the contracts tonight.
Right.
They're doing a experiential learning program. I think somewhere in Tiroshi, Miku this year, and they're going to be looking at Sagasam Seaweed as part of it. They're going to also be visiting Carlos to understand how he designed the process and made it workable. So they're visiting some of the projects we've funded around St. Lucia. But more beyond that, they're also going to be taught a little bit about rapid environmental audits, so they can go back to their school and do audits and design projects to address those the results from the audits. So that is coming soon. I think the comp starts in about 2 weeks' time.
Nice.
And we're trying to assist them in getting it done. And maybe there are a few calluses at the
You
National
never
Youth
know.
Council.
You never know. He needs company. It's lonely. It's lonely in his section of the world.
Yes, indeed.
Right. So, Carlos, should I go with? I want to end with you. So, Giles, we're running out of time. We have about 5 minutes left in the program. Final words.
Well, first of all, thank you again for inviting me to this program. We're delighted to show St. Lucia what can happen with a little bit of mentoring, nurturing, some grant funding to assist St. Lucians to bring the dreams to reality, to help us solve some of the most pressing problems today. And because we are we living in times of climate change where there are existential threats, we need young people to begin to research and to take risk to solve the kinds of problems that we're going to face in the future. And that is why this knowledge fair is coming up. We hope when we have it in early December, it's going to spark the brilliance of our St. Lucian people. The St. Lucian genius is yet to materialize. We've had 2 Nobel Prize winners, yes, but I'm thinking there are more out there.
Absolutely.
And we have to find a way to nurture them and to bring them forth. Our program is going to be here even beyond, even when I leave, it's still going to be here because it's 26 years now. Almost 26 years in existence, and I'm hoping that more and more young people are going to come to us with ideas. And of course, when they come, don't expect us to just accept it. We're going to put it through the scientific process. And so, as the same thing we did with Carlos, we're going to ask him, questions about the viability, whether or not it works, and so on. And if there's that spark we see there, we're going to fund it, and we hope that St. Lucia will benefit,
Absolutely.
and the world as well.
Before I get to you, Carlos, this is from another Jalabowi. Good night, Laura. Great program. As a Laborian, I am very proud of Mr. Noel, and thanks to Mr. Romulus and all who have supported him. Do work quickly on the patent before someone takes it apart and then patents it first. Keep inventing. Thank you so much for that. Final words. What would you say to the little boys and the little girls out there who are having such a hard time in school and just want to think, oh, it's just useless? What are your words of comfort to them?
Well, first of all, it has to start with their parents. Well, I wouldn't advise them to break down the parents' TV or the stereo. Yes, I did. That was kind of extreme. But support from your parents, it's of paramount importance. It's very, very important. I will advise any kid to drop out of school like I did. It's very risky, and it took a lot of energy and time and determination, a lot of determination, and it's not easy. So I wouldn't advise anybody to drop out. Try and continue schooling, get support from your parents, and there are more of me out there. And my mission is to find them and do whatever I can or do whatever it takes to push them forward.
Well said. Thank you so much, Carlos, for being here. Thank you so much, Giles, for being here. This is the kind of programming that I love, especially when you have young people like Carlos who's just doing things. And every day, like I said earlier, Carlos is somebody I've known all my life. And every day that I speak with him, I'm learning a new dimension of him. And I'm learning, I'm understanding his mind a little bit better and still, taking a guy back to, oh my God, can you imagine doing that? I think I would be so terrified at 15 or thereabouts to drop out of school and not know where I want to go, what I wanted to do, and just explore the world around you. And to have supportive parents like Mr. Noel and Mrs. Noel, and even his bigger sister, Caroline, just doing things and supporting him and being there for him. That is what makes a family. That's what a family unit is all about. Being supportive of your family members, even when you think that they're certifiably mad. You think they're certifiably mad, and you just want to say, oh my gosh, grow up already. Do something sane for once in your life. But being there and supporting them, this is what it's all about. And I'm particularly proud of Mr. Noel because he supported his son. And how many men do we know are actually in the homes raising their children, much less being supportive of them when they're being far out and crazy? Let us be a little bit more supportive parents. This is where we end tonight. And next week we'll have yet another episode, another exciting episode for you. Not with Jeff, of course, but something else. And this is where we say adieu. See you next week. Stay positive.